Okay. Well, good afternoon. My name's Willard Van de Bogart, and it's December 26th, 2017. I'm here in Hanover, New Hampshire at the Kendal care home with Sonia Landy Sheridan, who was the original founder of the Generative Systems Group way back in Chicago in the early 60s. And I've been following her work on Facebook, and she has put together her own Facebook page, but also the Facebook page for the Generative Systems Group. And she's been sharing the history of generative systems. Her own history spans 4 decades, and she's still generating new ideas within the generative system concept. And I've been experiencing some of these new ideas as well. And I thought, I live in Thailand, and I thought it would be a good idea to meet someone. There's not too many people that think like Sonia, and there's not too many people that think about some of the ideas that she has pioneered and where they are today in a modern context. And Sonia's going to talk about that. But we had a little conversation before this video, and we were talking about, Sonia was talking about riding the future with ideas and consciousness. And we were talking about systems thoughts. We're also talking about the threads of ideas that go through history. And we were at the idea of thinking in the moment and what time is in the moment. And there were just very many concepts that Sonia has been working on with time. And I had recently told her I went to Beijing for a lecture, and she has been to China with her husband and Japan, so she knows
Taiwan
and knows a great deal about the Chinese way of thinking. So with that short introduction, I'd like to have Sonia talk about our meeting and where we are today.
First of all, we are together because we're probably supposed to be, because we're searchers. Searchers are a special kind of people. They're forever searching. They're not satisfied until they understand the evolutionary process of a particular pattern that we happen to be producing according to our own biology, our own sex, our own backgrounds, so many things that form us. And so I find that the serious artist, for instance, is definitely a searcher. And they will go searching until they can find a place to do what they want to do. And that's how we got generative systems, is literally because people were looking for a place that they found didn't exist until they found there was one at the Art Institute of Chicago.
And you're also saying that we're looking for a new language today too. Could you expand on that?
Well, I don't think necessarily that you're absolutely looking for a new language. The fact is, a language is always in the process of evolution. We know now definitely that this generation is absolutely a visual generation. Mm-hmm. It's not merely an oral language, written word. Mm-hmm. It's being transposed. Why am I not upset about that? Because I've watched the evolution from, I did collect things for many years that I was unable to bring here, and they were called time machines. Some of them are out here now. We can't really look at them. They're not that important, but the one I left behind was very important. I had an encyclopedia from the early 1800s, all 12 volumes, and then I had an encyclopedia from the 1960s, and that encyclopedia was from I think Time magazine, something like that, and it was about sewing. Fact is that the sewing magazine was all visual. It took us through the evolution of the very beginning of learning to sew until learning from other cultures in high resolution, beautifully colored images. What about the 1800s book? It was visually very sad. It was black and white. For instance, they wanted to show how the human being developed. Starts with a man, and then as he's drinking, he gets cartoon-like, getting, uglier and uglier and uglier until he's falling apart practically. But the language was so rich, the number of adjectives. You're talking about Shakespearean language.
Right.
And so you get an evolution there. And it's that evolutionary process that really probably influenced my having generative systems, my doing so many things I do, and that comes out from not only studying elsewhere, but from a family that trains me.
And today, I've heard you mention that the artists today can develop memes that'll go through time.
Precisely.
How do you define that?
By a meme, I mean a picture, and unfortunately we can't have the camera on it right now, but I'm looking at Nikola Tesla, and it's showing his photograph, and underneath it has a simple statement. It says, if you wish to understand the universe, think of energy, frequency, and vibration, Nikola Tesla. And so although he was ignored during his own time, he's definitely a part of the future. Whatever he thought, however he thought, is part of the future. There are companies formed on it to go into the future.
And you mentioned a judgment of the future. What did that mean, actually?
Now, but I don't recall by whom was a judgment.
No, you were saying he was able to, the judgment that he had of the future had to wait. He was in the future.
Oh, I see. What I was talking about when I'm saying that about him. In other words, at the time he's living and he's working for, and I keep forgetting the name of people I don't want to forget anymore, Edison. Edison. At that time, Tesla was working for him. But and without, we would not have the electricity that we have now.
Right.
If Tesla had not done it for Edison. And so at that time he's not really appreciated. In fact, he dies in poverty. But he will end up, now there are Tesla automobiles, Tesla everything, and another 100 years Tesla is still going to be around, because fundamentally he had the vision of an artist, he had the character of an artist. That means a willingness to travel wherever it was needed. You have to earn a living, so you go to work for Edison or you do something or other to try to do that. But fundamentally, you're going to follow your own path, your own trajectory. If you cannot follow your own trajectory or your own path, and of course you might be handicapped, you might have a disruptive family. That could happen to you. You might be unfortunate and somehow you get sick and you die. I mean, there are all sorts of possibilities.
Well, am I hearing that the generative systems process could foster following your own ideas and cultivating your own path?
Absolutely. The fact is that, especially you're dealing with people who call themselves artists, but we're also dealing with scientists. We're now dealing with people from multiple areas.
Right.
Some of them are in business, taking over the various institutions, trying to figure out what to do with it.
Right.
And so, yes.
What would you say would be what is your method for combining many of the different scientists and artists and assimilating them for a new idea?
It's an outgrowth of letting things happen, but knowing when negative things happen, what possibilities are there for you to turn it around? This is not free thinking or sitting down and trying to, it's something that you develop within you, and I say from the age of 3. That's how far back.
You're also saying that, are you also saying that in that discovery, we would make a meme, a new kind of visual kind of representation of our ideas that would lead everyone into the future?
We know that from the very fact that we see these memes constantly changing. When I told you previously that I'm a trained artist and I make nice posters, and I was making memes and I had very interesting ideas behind them. But when I saw what the young people were doing, taking other people's words, not necessarily their own, but beautiful selection of words from ages ago, and then putting it with images that are very clear, I thought, I don't need to do this. The young generation is doing that. Let's go back and see what's more important for you to do to help them. And one of the things for me more important was to somehow, somehow somebody was trying to, and sometimes it's accident. For instance, how did I get Theo Theron? How did I get
I see what you
Scott?
mean. Right.
That's right, Forshaw.
Right.
I really didn't get them in a way. What happened is one day by accident, I had all these people on this group, closed group, generative assistant,
right,
and a sign came up and said 33 people are trying to get on. So I go and I immediately answer it. For the first time I bothered to look at it because there's so much to do on this thing.
Right.
And I see, oh, that guy's over in France. I need him. I need another person from France. "Oh, that guy sounds like he's from another universe. He's a male version of me. I want that guy."
Okay.
And sure enough, and that's how the people came out. So immediately I added about 6 or 7 other countries, just that way. Or give you another example. For instance, I write to the board of the trustees at the Art Institute of Chicago, where I taught in the school of the Art Institute of Chicago.
Right.
And there I asked, for apparently the first time, that I needed a leave of absence in 1964 to go to Taiwan, where my husband was working with Chinese history.
Okay.
And I also wanted to work with something. They gave it to me.
Right.
Okay, why did it turn negative? I went and I produced over 100 things, had an excellent exhibition. I couldn't do the science stuff, but I did something as close as I could, and that is I created actual objects that dealt with many Goethe ideas and dealt with color, because I had been working with diffraction gratings.
Okay.
So now where are we going with that? So now what happens is I get back from Taiwan, I've been kicked out of all my classes. I've been kicked out of drawing. I've been kicked.
Why did they do that?
Because I was gone.
They told you could go.
Well, somebody else had convinced me to change one of my courses, a drawing course. He was in, at that time you had a division just previously between industrial and between art, fine art. And he was industrial. He did beautiful jewelry work, beautiful. But the fact is that he wanted a drawing, so I gave him the drawing. And he gave me the silkscreen. Now, what was wrong? His silkscreen was beautiful, in that he used little embroidery hoops and put silk in, and then they drew with crayons and things, and did a whole series. So he did a beautiful job. But when I got back, they took me and left me in silkscreen, and they put me in the industrial part in all silkscreen. So immediately, what happened? These are very interesting stories, by the way. What happened is that I began working with a man called Mel Green. His stuff is now with us in the Art Institute of Chicago Museum.
Right.
And he had, with his brother, they owned a company, Advanced Screen Company.
Right.
And we started working together. And he introduced me to a scientist who gave us a blow-up machine so we could catch up with the newspapers, and we could immediately, you see, begin to get stuff out rapidly. However, we're still doing photographs, and they're slow too. So I went looking for something, and I found a thermofax for $20. And I told the guy who was selling me the thermofax up in north of Chicago, in a lovely area, in a 3M company of a little sort. And I said, "Oh, but my goodness, you know, that looks like a simple..." He said, "What do you mean a simple system?" He says, "You know, they have about 300 papers you could do transparent." I heard the word, and I got so excited. He said, "Oh," this to himself, "this woman's really hot." So he said, "I'll tell you something. What I'm going to tell you," he said, "is that at 500 North Michigan, they have a machine under wraps. And that machine..." And so what did I happen? Don Conlon, who was in charge of the 3M color system, gets on the phone, talks to me, said he had talked with Time magazine, the artist who makes the covers, and the artist said to him, "You don't use a machine to make art. You don't use a machine." And so oh my goodness, I said. He talked to me about 2 hours, and he invited me north. And so although I wanted to continue working with the silkscreen company, it became a little more difficult, and we did various things together, trying to keep together.
What do you think is the inspiration that you get from connecting diverse kinds of ideas? You know, very disruptive for a lot of artists. One artist is saying machines can't make art. You get an epiphany with a color machine, and all of a sudden. So what? And since you're the director of the generative systems process, what advice would you give an artist to be able to combine these differences for a new idea without feeling they're going to be threatened for their own?
I don't give instructions. I can tell you what I did. That's what I can tell you. You'll have to be fortunate. I was fortunate because in the history of America, I came from the English, then the Germans, then the Irish, and then the Russians, and the Dutch, and with Pennsylvania Dutch. Okay, and so that's part of it. But another part of it is I had parents who literally came from impoverished kinds of situations, but were brilliant. and also knew how to move with innocence. They understood evolution. They understood creativity. They said to me, Sonia, to be an artist is the most privileged position in the society. Therefore, it requires responsibility.
Right.
And I knew from my education with them that responsibility meant looking for the truth. Now, you don't look for the truth by sitting down there and telling you the truth. I found a couple of ways in an artist, and that is to take a negative thing and turn it into a positive, and to not, why not just go after fighting again the positive? Because I had enough political background to know that that turns into a negative. You turn into the very thing you don't want to be, because you're fighting against something that you don't want to be a part of. And so you're not going to change it. What you do is to go on to the next stage, and the next stage, and the next stage. And now what I'm talking about is you're going into the future. So when a scientist by the name, who was an astronomer, by the way, whose father was Frank Malina, and that was the man after Sputnik, the Americans went crazy. So they got a hold of Frank Malina. Right. And Frank Malina, of course, sent the first rocket up. So there's a whole story there too. So everything is a story.
And you connect very closely to his son. But all these experiences that you've had, you've called them fortunate. But you took that fortunate experience, that the advice of your parents, and you were able to conceive of a new idea for putting things together, which is why I'm here, is to talk to you about how you've been able to continue always with these new ideas. And today you're talking about bringing your own ideas into the future, even when you've passed from this physical body. You're saying that your ideas that you have can also exist the same way they exist here. So I like this fluid nature that you're talking now about time.
I have to go now to something more fundamental. It happens to be who you are, both your DNA, both who your parents are, but who you are. We were 3 children. They were all very bright, so intelligence has nothing to do with it. They're extremely bright, all had masters. But there was something different about me, something different. And what happened was that I had parents who seemed to understand it.
What do you think the difference is within yourself?
Within myself?
What is this difference that you are alluding to?
I was very much, I think I was, we were 1, 2, 3 in ages.
Right.
A year apart, each of us. And my father was setting up schools for the immigrants that they're doing the opposite for now. Right. And my mother was teaching them English. And at the same time were teaching me at age 3 to read and write.
My goodness.
Yes. So I end up in the 6th grade, but I keep falling out of the chair. This is an elementary school in the Bronx. And I end up in the 3rd grade. So I start out in the 3rd grade. And I'm encouraged. Nobody ever stopped me. So I had to take care of the kids. So they're both hardships in a way. And how did I was not really a good sister in a way, but when they did bad things that were dangerous to them, like lighting fires under the heater, then I would immediately take charge. I was just enough older. I was 4 while they were, say, 3 or 2.
Now you're carrying a concept that many people around the world can have access to, and the fire is burning on the planet, and we have this generative systems thing. So you had mentioned that we can take a meme and turn the meme into what's happening in the world today, turning into we can actually contribute to the world situation through the creativity, using the generative systems process. Could you elaborate on that a little?
Okay, one of the things that people say about things like Facebook, and that, talking about the older people here too, is that, oh, you get all this bad stuff. I say it's like getting a telephone. You get a telephone, and you get and who's going to be on the telephone when you first had a telephone?
Right, a bill collector, that's bad.
Well, at that time it was just the operator, you know, if you go back far enough. So the same thing is true with anything, and that is that I think it takes a certain amount of courage for artists to be artists. They also cannot, what I learned with time is they cannot think of money. The only way you have to think about is, how do you feed yourself? How do you house yourself? You've got to do that. Do you want a family? How are you going to feed and house them? You don't pre-think it, but you have a feeling within inside you, and you sort of follow it, and you make a lot of mistakes along the way. You make a lot of mistakes.
Because there's no really lesson plan to follow.
There's no lesson plan
to follow
because
your
you
own
are
inner
different.
path, Right.
Because you yourself are a different person.
Mhm.
So each person has his or own path. The reason we have so many people that were with me back in the 60s, by the way, some of them, like Bill McCabe
Right.
was my student in the 60s,
Correct.
was precisely because we understood one another. They were a different age, quite separated age-wise,
Mhm.
but nevertheless, we were seekers. We were seekers. We were looking, and if somebody would let us look and help us look, we would be happy. And that way, you did away with all the different ways of teaching art, where everybody was competing, everybody was looking at your work as a teacher and then copying it. To me, once the generative systems happened, and I didn't just create it, the society created it. How did it get its name? I knew one thing. I knew about systems because of my own education we were talking about.
Right.
I knew about systems. And so Ian Robertson, who was in charge of publications at the Art Institute of Chicago, way back in the late 1960s, he said, okay, they're going to put you up as duplicating systems. Ooh, don't do that. We don't duplicate anything. Well, what are you doing? I said, one thing I know is we have a system. There's a philosophy, there's a point of view, there are attitudes, and so it is a system, and we'll make it whatever kind of system it's going to be. Depending upon our own philosophy, our own beliefs, and obviously we think be kind to others, create communities and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Think differently about how you think of money, but you've got to survive.
Right.
Okay, what else do you do? I said, well, now that you ask me now, I said, what kind of system do you have? We're seeing ideas and images we didn't have before.
Right.
Oddly enough, now that I'm talking to you, I realize I did have those in my family. Those ideas were there. They were implanted in me by very unusual couple from impoverished families, which is very interesting. One from far northern Minnesota, up in the very top hitting Canada, and the other from parents who had come from Russia, from the very far west,
Right.
at the time that the Tsar was there.
This is an excellent short historical overview. Let's move it to now and see if we can make some dialogue about the future, because I know that's an exciting
Yes.
topic for you.
Yes.
So where are we going let's do this riding into the future. The last time we talked, we were
Yes.
talking about riding into the future with our art. How do we ride into the future with our art, in your opinion?
There obviously, for each person, it's going to be something different. If they take the opportunities, or if they're prepared for the opportunities.
Prepared.
And prepared. By prepared, it could be educational. It could be we were educated on a farm, and you were a farmer, and now you found
The
a
way
new way
you
to
were
do
prepared.
something.
Okay.
The way that
The
you
circumstances in your life
were prepared. The circumstances in your life.
are an indication of how you might, if you want to be
Yes.
an artist, observe things.
Okay, the way it was for me was I had from the mother, who was an intellectual also, but primarily somebody who understood nature completely.
Right.
And from my father, who understood nature through the process of learning.
So what you're saying is the artist should look at the preparation where they came from. I look at my father, I look at my mother, I grew up on the ocean, that's
It
all.
doesn't have to be pre-thought, though.
Doesn't have to be
Just be
pre-thought.
acceptive of who you are. You might have to fight against it, or you might have to keep learning. I'm still learning. I'm going to be 93 shortly,
Right.
and I'm absolutely learning all the time.
No, it's amazing, really. But it's worth exploring too, because you have something to contribute to how you understand this long life that is including all of these, connecting all of these dots, so to speak,
Precisely.
with new things. So I'm still asking you about how we connect these dots. Where are these dots now, do you think, in the future, in our present?
Well, I tell you, if they undo the internet the way it is,
I
that's
saw
going to
that.
be a tremendous blow. However, the only solution I've agreed with online with the young people, because I'm a Bernie person, by the way.
Yes.
I went to the same school as Bernie for a year. I don't know if you know that, the high school,
I
for
mean,
1 year,
isn't
until they
that-
built my school.
in
At any
the
rate,
Bronx.
so I say get the bodies out there. Some of us are going to be killed. I say that because I can't get out there now. I can't get anywhere.
Mhm.
I don't even get outside this place.
Yes.
So at any rate,
No, I hear that, the limitations on access to knowledge, as well as the deleting terms like fetus, and deleting terms like climate change, and deleting certain vocabulary words that do connect to other things, that somehow or other there's a group of people that are limiting language.
I think that the couple of things that will save America, if it can be saved now, and I'm speaking about America from, and mourning the population that was killed in order for us to come out of Europe here, and I'm still working with the American Native groups because they are very important to me. So as a result of that, just repeat your question again, because I interrupted myself and I sidetracked myself with another thought.
No, the knowledge is being limited. They're deleting a group of people that are in charge. The EPA, for example, they eliminated the scientists. The Center for Disease Control, they're eliminating certain words that you're not supposed to use, so that you don't get.
I think that
you don't use them in your vocabulary.
I think that the young generation, the ones that I have been watching for the last, let's say, 4 or 5 years since the elections began, and before that, is they seem to have done away with all sorts of the propaganda that we've been given. All countries give propaganda, by the way.
Right.
But we, as any country, give out the propaganda. How we're taught history, what we're taught. And those young people are open. That's why Bernie got so many people gathered together. There were moms of people coming. And I felt one with them. I felt they were thinking the way that I was thinking. That this world is yet to be made.
So this openness that you're talking about with the young people, this is an element that's in the generative systems process as well.
Absolutely. Not only that, but we don't dismiss the negative. They're closed systems. Sometimes a person has to do research. In order to do so, you have to move in very carefully. Now, where were those things that you needed for your machine at that particular moment for your camera?
Can we do this with online, do you think? Can it be done online?
I would like to try it online. I'm right now what you call on the Sonia one, and we have a few messages. But in order to get there, we just go up here in the corner.
Sonia's going to her website. I'm sorry you can't see it.
It's very simple.
Camera on that right now.
Now we're on Generative Systems.
Right. This is the Generative Systems Facebook page that Sonia is presently looking at.
Now, who we're looking at? Let me show you the top.
And she's
on the top. What we're looking at
the top
is we're looking at John Dunn.
Right.
And by the way, he's practically blind now, and he lives in Texas now. And John Dunn created the first computer graphic for the PC and the most beautiful system I have ever used. In fact, right now, he put up a picture here some way.
Now,
yes.
And you're referring to John based on what is the connection? Why are you mentioning this?
John Dunn is
we were talking about
my
openness.
Graduate student.
Right.
Actually, he wasn't. People stole the records. And he was over in video. But in video at the time, they didn't want him to build a computer. So one of my students, Mary Jane Love Dougherty at the time, said, why don't we go over to Sonia? She's got this big place over there. And that's another story. Everything's a story we won't get into because all these wonderful stories. And so John came in, and we happened to have a huge room that was supposed to be a bathroom for all in the new building of the Art Institute of Chicago. Instead, they gave it to me because the professors or the teachers wanted to put me in a closet under the staircase. And so the architect, and maybe Roger Gilmore, who lives there, was part of that, got me into this big room. But we had 3 little rooms with windows in them. And John Dunn came down, and I said, John, I don't have any money right now, but we'll take the telecopier, which is like a fax machine, and we'll trade it in for $1,000, and I'll give you the $1,000, but you'll have to buy the material to make the computer, but you own it afterwards. But I have one other stipulation. That is that you take at least 10 students in periodically to show them what you're doing. He not only took them in all the time, but he hired one in his company that he set up, Time Arts Incorporated. That was just before Silicon Valley. Really, he trained the people for that, in fact. But also he just kept coming and just keep training him, and he's still doing it. My son about 20 years ago began working with him, and of course they've been working on a sound and something I wanted, and that is John Donne had made a Van Gogh program that I adored. It would go from A to B, use ASCII characters, and then in the middle you get the most beautiful images you ever see.
So maybe what could be done with the Generative Systems website now is to introduce other scientists on the website, that when the new artist or the old artist wants to try to explore a new language, they could see that, and they could go to a theoretical biologist, or they could go to a software designer, and they could ask a question perhaps, and
they may ask other kinds of questions too.
But it would lead to helping the artist become this open generative systems meme creator for the future that you're talking about.
Since I'm no longer acting, I taught kindergarten 1 year, I taught 10 years in the high school, I taught in Taiwan, Taipei American School, and I taught over 22 years in the university, in the college level. And therefore, I'm now working with people around the world who are themselves trying to figure out what to do. And therefore, this is the kind of person I would pick up on Generative Systems. I told you about Theo.
Aldo Tambellini, right.
Member of Generative Systems in November 2016. So he's only been in a year. But during that time, you have no idea what I've learned from this young man. It's incredible what I've learned. And I found out that everything that I thought I alone was doing, and notice who he's befriended, Aldo Tambellini, and Martha, and Aldo, by the way, came and taught for a year. That's Aldo there. And he's connected with Martha Loving Organ, who's from Virginia, but who's been living up.
We're looking at the Facebook page with Aldo Tambellini and Martha Loving Organ.
She's always there because she goes.
It visits Sonia all the time here at Kendal in Hanover, New Hampshire.
That's exactly.
But these things, these are what the people do. But I think there can be an instructive section within the generative system.
Well, it would have to be one of these people on it, and somebody. I don't know. You'd have to. I don't know what to. Now, for instance, one of the people is.
Maybe I could give it a try.
Okay, that'd be great. But I'll tell you who started working already. But I think his idea was to take over Generative Systems, and he's my earliest student. His name is Bill McCabe.
Oh, right.
And so he created a Generative Systems, but it followed everybody up. They kept going here. So we finally arranged it after a number of years. I didn't tell him what to do. I let it happen. And what he did is he became an archive. And he put up an archive. But he has multiple sclerosis, and he has a lot of physical problems too. He participates constantly, and he gives some really good stuff online. I think because of his illness and the age now, that would be difficult. If you did something like that, that would be fantastic.
Well, I'd like to do something that has a suggestion in it, that if someone is looking for a new art language, I mean, art is quite well known around the planet, but the Generative Systems art form procedure seems to me to capture ideas that one has, and they don't float away, but they're grabbed and they're put into a context and connected to things, and you use them, whether they're a memory of your family or a memory of something.
It could very definitely a spin-off. I don't think for the moment that it turned out to be what I thought it might be, McCabe's.
Right.
I think that it has to be somebody who is exactly for doing the kinds of thing that you're asking. Begin to set the basic stages. At my time in life, where I'm begging for 5 more years, I definitely am cooking up with people around the world who are in charge of the programs, who are writing books, who are taking the images, are trying to use them, because they learn a great deal from the images. What they learned from my images is back in the 1960, really 1963 we're talking about. I would sit down at a table at midnight, after midnight usually, and at that time I would do something, because I knew that I wasn't going to make a tech art, was going to make art I wasn't going to lose the past. In the process of making the future, do not lose the past. And therefore I had to go inside, and I just asked my hand, and that's what we get to the whole Dow business.
And you have maybe we could show some of those paintings. I was going to put your paintings on several tablet computers, But maybe I could stop this, start it again, and we could have a few of your paintings, and we could have a conversation about the work that you did that came from...
we have to go on here and look them up, and we'd have to be in the other room where I really can't go that easily.
Oh, maybe, could we pull some of your artwork up here? We could, right?
We can pick what's at the Hood Museum, and they have a lot of the inner, I call them the inner landscape.
Okay, so why don't we set that up? We'll stop this. We'll go to the Hood Museum. I'll change the video, and then we can talk about the paintings just for a little bit.
Okay.
Okay?
That's fine.
Okay, so we're going to stop this conversation now. We're going to go...
I just want to see if there's important
We're
messages.
talking about images that she has done.
Let's just see what it feels.
Represents the past, emotions, and
look,
contextualizing the artwork
he's telling us,
from the past.
Good luck today, Sonia. So mote it be. All systems are go.
Uh-huh.
He'll always participate when he's supposed to.
Well, we're reading Theo Theron now, who just sent a message.
He's saying, good luck today, Sonia. So mote it be. All systems are go.
Well, we could say, Theo, we're going to try to show some artwork of Sonia and talk about the process that she went through so that it can be understood.
I think I will have to show them because the axis is so complicated here.
Yeah.
It's all on Facebook, but you'd have to go through hours.
Yeah. So we'll just go to the Hood Museum, pick out a few. I'll stop the video right now, and we'll set that up, and we can pick 3 or 4 or something like that.
Okay.
So this is a wonderful conversation with Sonia, to hear her talk about how ideas are generated within her world and the possibilities of how these ideas can be used.
And no oversimplification.
And no, what's that again?
No oversimplification.
No.
That things are what they are at a certain stage, and we don't suddenly change them. There's a level of integrity. One thing I loved about my husband, he had a lot of problems, that beautiful man, but he had integrity down his back. There was integrity. That means an honest. That's what my parents meant.
You're saying don't simplify your ideas, have integrity, own them, maybe. Is that what you're saying?
I say show what you think, whether people understand them or not. There are enough people who will find out that, oh yes, this is what I did. She's right on the path, you see. In other words, it's a more natural system of weaving in. It's about weaving. I really think of writing the internet, and I call writing the internet as a kind of multidimensional weaving.
Right.
And that weaving, it starts out as the way that I was, and I don't know maybe now, but I'm saying the way that I have been, is first you have a simple 2D system and you're weaving. You can take the threads apart, and we're talking computer language now, and you can probably put them together within an hour or so.
Right.
Now you put them into a ball and you make them multidimensional, 3-dimensional.
Right.
Now, you can take them apart, it's going to be harder to get. But what happens when that ball, and that was Sonia, is moving all the time and always moving with the evolutionary process?
That's a very good concept, I think.
That's a very interesting.
I like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then
the moving ball of thread through time.
Precisely.
And the connections are always changing.
That's exactly right. And it's evolving, and everything around you is evolving.
And everything around you.
Who taught you to deal with that?
And out of that, you make a meme. Is that what comes out of your mind?
I don't know, because I'm thinking of meme as something static there, as a picture on, and we're not going that way.
We need a fluid meme.
We're just going to flowing in time.
Flowing.
In fact, when we go to those images at the Hood, you will find one here. In fact,
changing art, moving with time.
Let's just go.
Well, we're going to have to get the pictures. So we're going to stop the video. We'll go to the pictures so we can see what you're talking about. It's been a wonderful conversation. We've been talking. I've been watching the time over a half hour. Maybe 45 minutes this time.
Yeah.
So we'll be back very shortly with some pictures of Sonia's work. Okay?
That's good. I think I'm going to